So ocean planning in Washington really came about from a couple different perspectives. One was renewable energy that was being proposed off our coast and in the wrong place, right in the middle of prime fishing grounds. And the national ocean policy calling out marine spatial planning and a desire at the local level and state level to really have our interests developed in a plan that we could bring to the table. So it was from those two aspects, and we're really focusing on a variety of new uses, addressing a variety of potential new uses that we could see in the future off of our coast. So in managing expectations during the scoping process, we brought together these really diverse stakeholders, ocean users, conservation groups, local government, state and federal agencies, and tribes to come together around goals and objectives in the study area. But it was really clear that they had different perspectives over what really we could do in our plan and what those bounds were. And so we actually brought in outside experts to help give everybody common information. In this case, it was NOAA to really explain what the state, how the state could apply to review federal projects in federal waters, and what the criteria would be for making that case for coastal effects, and what kind of criteria NOAA would look at for us making that case, and gave us advice on, here are some different factors you may want to consider in setting your study area. And so that common information was really critical for everybody to have to manage their expectations over what was achievable or not in our planning process. And so really our lesson learned there was that outside experts can be really helpful in providing common information to have a productive dialogue around, but that it's not an ongoing process. There are still people who feel like we should have gone farther. And so it's an ongoing dialogue. You always have to come back to why those decisions were made. So there are lots of techniques for stakeholder engagement, and I think for us, we've realized that you need a lot of different techniques for different types of stakeholders. And we have an advisory council that has key sectors, ocean sectors, represented on it, and it meets every couple months and provides a really robust place for conversation and details about the planning process. And those are the really most engaged sectors and people in the planning process. And even with that, they wanted to be able to provide more input, and there was sort of a need from the planning process side to give them more of a role. So we established a technical committee that actually has conference calls on a monthly basis and allows them to dig into more detail. At the same time, I think a lot of planners worry about engaging stakeholders beyond that core constituency, and how do you reach those other folks? And we've seen that unfold in a couple different ways in our planning process. When we were doing scoping for our goals and objectives, we wanted a really balanced group across governments, local, state, federal, and tribal, as well as stakeholder groups. And so we had to limit the number of people invited to those workshops and in those conversations. But the local communities felt like they needed more. So they actually proposed to hold a series of forums at the local level where they brought in neutral facilitators, trusted organizations to foster those conversations, gather those interests and perspectives, and bring them to the conversation. And so it was a great way for them to be able to have the conversation amongst themselves with trusted folks, and without the feeling that government was telling them what they could or couldn't say. And then we were able to then bring that to the table as part of the planning process. And so those kinds of workshops, you can't expect those people who are very busy to come to every advisory council meeting. So you kind of have to go to them, use respected organizations to help foster those conversations and get those perspectives into the planning process.